Good evening. Good evening. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Edwards. I'm the Executive Director here at Lakewood Center for the Arts and Lakewood Theater Company. And on behalf of our Board of Directors and our staff and our volunteers, welcome to Lake Oswego Reads Art Show. How many is this, Jen?
Number 20.
Number 20. I started when I was 5.
I wasn't born yet.
Jan, it's not your turn yet. I mentioned I'm the director here at Lakewood, but I'm doing double duty. I'm also president of the Friends of Lake Oswego Public Library. And I hold your applause, I know it. But you should applaud the Friends, and there are many board members from the Friends who are here. So, Friends board members, would you please stand and be acknowledged? And you should be joined by library advisory board members. If you are here, please stand. If not, you're off the advisory board. Okay, good to know. And thanks to Melissa Kelly, our fabulous executive director for the library director. She does a fabulous job. We are here on the Henley Main Stage, and it is a theater. So if you have one of these instruments in your pocket, would you please put it to silence mode so that when God calls you, you can do that privately. So you just missed a fabulous show that was on our main stage. How many of you, this is your first time being in this room? Oh, this is great. Oh, you. Okay, we talk later. Only one, that's pretty good. Oh, two? There were two. They're together.
No. Cameraman.
The cameraman. Oh, he's been here several times. We're on the Henley Main Stage, which is home for Lakewood Theater Company. And we just finished the Glass Menagerie. And behind this curtain, they are building the set for the musical Funny Girl. And that opens April the 24th. Tickets are now on sale. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, order them today, or you'll say to yourself, why didn't I listen to that guy? Because this show will sell out very well. The leads are fabulous. We did a presentation to a group yesterday. And oh my gosh, they knock your socks off. The lady, Milsa Gale, who plays Fanny Bryce, is just fabulous. The other thank you we need to make is to the wonderful volunteer coordinator for the Lake Oswego Public Library, who helps coordinate the details for this evening, Nancy Nyland. Now, Jan has reminded me to emphasize to you that all of the pieces are for sale. There's just one little hiccup. You can't take it home. You have to leave it. It goes on tour, and Jan will probably explain more of that, since she's probably telling my off stage that I'm not saying it correctly. But they're all for sale, and the artists would love it if they saw a red dot on their picture, and there will be an opportunity for you to buy afterwards, because there will be some desserts after this, and you can also talk to the artists as well. So, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the lady, the myth, the legend, the person who puts all of this together, artist extreme to the oomph. What's your name again? Jan Rimmerman, everybody.
All right, people, here you go. This Emma Patty's book, Tilt, was a little bit of a challenge in some ways, delightful in other ways. We got to be familiar with locations that we all know and love, IKEA to be one. We got to learn about characters that we grew to love and to not like. We also learned a lot about symbolism, intentions, and a lot of relationships. So to start us off, we are pretending that we are at a book club. And so these are the artists that have all read the book. They've gone through, read it several times, come up with several different kinds of mediums and several different kinds of designs each, and struggled, maintained great freedoms. But I would like to introduce to you the talented group of professional artists for 2026. They are, keep your applause to the end. All right, I'm just going to say their names and then we'll applause them at the end. Natalie Wood, Beth Yazari, Diane Lacottie's living in Arizona, so she's not here, Beth Verheiden, Kara Pilcher, Leanne Streit, Carrie Gilbert, Terry Neal, Bonnie Garlington, Leslie Cheney Parr, Maria Olea, Dave Hazlett, Nancy Sterling, Lisa Finch-Heiser, Mary Burgess, Shobha Jetmalani, and Susie Cowan, Jim Welder, and myself, Jan Rimmerman. Give them all a round of applause. Alrighty, so we spent 2 hours together talking about each of our pieces and wrestling over the characters and what the big story was here in Portland and how to be prepared, which comes in later in the month. And please do go to some of the events that Nancy and Eileen has planned. Very interesting. So what we have found, and this is an opinion by me, I think that the more challenging of a book, the higher quality of artwork comes out. And I hope you agree. Did you love these pieces this year? With that said, it is my great pleasure to introduce Natalie and ask the first question. So Natalie, your image and art process relates to the sun, and can you explain how that happens?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying someone wise once told me we cannot control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we react to it. So with that in mind, I was really inspired by how much the author used the sun and how surreal it made it, because we don't think of Portland as this sunny place. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if I took my photography and did a cyanotype? And a cyanotype, it's a sun print. You take something and you expose it under the sun, and it's a chemical process, and you rinse it off and you have this awesome picture. And I thought, let's just do that, it'll be great. And 40 prints later, because like Portland, like the book, you cannot predict the sun. You cannot know how even if you're doing a test strip, you don't know what it's gonna turn out like. And there were tears, there were yelling, but I kind of kept the spirit of the book and just said, you know what, I have to just stay curious and keep going and meet my goals. So that's what I did, and I was so excited to be able to use just a really cool process of using the sun, harnessing it, and creating something unique and original. So speaking of unique and original, Beth, your title is Metamorphosis, and your piece is incredible, and I think it has so much detail in it. So I'd love for you to tell everyone a little bit more about your process and why you named it Metamorphosis.
Well, first I want to say I'm so impressed with your persistence, and it really reminds me of Annie's persistence as she tries to make it through Portland. I thought the profound metamorphosis that Annie was going through as she prepared to give birth was mirrored by the chaos and the society around her. And those of us in the audience and up here on the stage who have given birth can attest to the fact that it is really like a physical and emotional earthquake. It's profoundly awe-inspiring and tumultuous, and you feel like your world is turning inside out. So I wanted to represent the fact that Annie's child is being born in the midst of societal chaos on the one hand, but that also assert that life is going to go on and ultimately triumph due to the power of Annie's maternal love and strength. So I wanted my piece to focus on the symbolism of the green caterpillar that she rescues from IKEA, because to me it represented emotional support and love. And I also found a reference to 2 dancing white butterflies in the book. It was kind of a passing reference, but I love butterflies. So I did some research, and I found out that the cabbage white butterfly, which is native to this area, emerges from a green caterpillar. So I depicted its life cycle from the egg to the caterpillar, to the cocoon, to the emerging butterfly, and kind of as an echo of the birth journey that takes place in the book. And I also chose a round canvas, which is kind of a challenge to work on, but I liked it because it allowed the canvas to be tilted in a way that kind of references the book's instability. So if you keep it directly up, the cocoon kind of straight up and down, the butterfly has this little path to fly out, but if you tilt it to the right, the butterfly is sort of trapped and the whole life cycle is subsumed by the tsunami waves. And I chose the tsunami waves, I chose to use traditional Japanese textile patterns in them because Japan shares with us kind of a vulnerability to earthquakes and tsunamis. So that's a little bit about my piece. Beth, you were going to talk a little bit about Diane Locati's piece, and could you tell us why she chose to use a map of Portland as the structure?
It was really fun for me to talk with Diane about her painting. She told me that she was struck by the destruction and the chaos of a torn-up community after an earthquake, and she wanted to portray that feeling by tearing up pieces of painted paper, then rearranging them on a hand-drawn map to represent the river, the bridges, and the buildings that are so recognizable in Portland. She then added more lines to emphasize Annie's journey to find her husband, Dom, and to lead your eye through and around the painting. The placement of Bean in the bottom right-hand corner of the painting represents the park where Bean was born, and it also symbolizes a new beginning for Annie. And if I were to personally kind of tie a bow around Diane's piece, I would say that this piece is all about the journey during chaos.
Thank you for answering for Diane, Beth, and I would like to hear a little bit about your piece now. And you know, there's so much tenderness to it, and I heard that you used only a few colors to create it, so I'm wondering what colors you chose and why you chose to emphasize tenderness.
Two very interesting questions, and thank you for asking. First, on the limited palette and the colors that I chose. Normally, when we artists talk about using a limited palette, we talk about the 3 primary colors as our limited palette, and we mix all of our colors from that. But in this case, I used 3 colors that were not primaries. They were a gray, a brown gray, and a yellow orange. And neutral colors, which are grays and browns, often feel introspective, thoughtful, and quiet. That's the feeling that it might evoke as you look at a painting that has used those colors. Those feelings are opposite to the feelings that are portrayed in the book. The book portrayed a lot of chaos and anxiety, and so I chose to paint a tender scene instead of a chaotic one. This was an interesting journey of my own, and I needed to read the book a second time in order to find the deeper meaning in the book. The first time I read the book, I had a very strong reaction to Annie, not necessarily a good one. I found her to be angry, self-centered, and full of regrets. She talked all the way through the book about the regrets of her life, things that she should have done, things she shouldn't have done. And that had an impact on me. But I knew there had to be more to Annie. I wanted there to be more to Annie than her regrets. So I read the book again. And the second time, I felt much more compassionate towards her. I felt that why she was angry and bitter became more important than the fact that she had annoyed me so much. She had almost non-stop conversations with Bean, her unborn child. It was like she was processing her life through Bean. At first, her conversations centered around her dislike of being pregnant and her own unhappiness. As time went on, and she was making her journey through Portland after the earthquake, her conversations became more introspective, and she would ask Bean questions like, "How did we get here, Bean? Let me tell you about your father, Bean." And I thought that Bean became Annie's refuge, a way for her to look forward and not back. These were the tender moments that I wanted to focus on. Now, Kara, I get to ask you about your wonderful painting, always so creative. When I first saw your painting, and it was a little thumbnail on my phone, I didn't see the numbers of the clock and the clock hands, But knowing you and how you do things, I know that those numbers and the clock must hold significance for you. Can you tell us about that?
Well, this whole book is dealing with the aspect of time, all aspects of time. In fact, each chapter title was organized around the passage of time from past years, months, days, and those interspersed with the chapters with passing moments, minutes, and hours of the present. So I chose to paint a clock, of course. And I used a plastic cover of a Costco pie to make the glass covering of the clock. And I cut it jaggedly down the middle to emphasize the destruction from the earthquake and also the breaking and disorientation of time itself. I tilted the clock where the Roman numeral 12, whether it's noon or midnight, was no longer at the top, and one of the clock hands makes a loop-de-loop in confusion, and the other is bent, but points to the Roman numeral 9, the 9 months of gestation of being. The broken clock's halves arch over the door of the image of little being in utero, representing the decision to pass through to the future towards the light of love and hope. Leanne, you're a weaver and also an architect, and you inspired, your work was inspired by making something 3D. Why was that?
So I chose to do a more 3D piece because it was a way to separate two separate but related ideas I had. I went through the Northridge earthquake, and I was awoken by my bed shaking and hearing things break around me. I drove into work that morning, and I saw complete buildings off their foundations and overpasses where part of it had collapsed. So when I read the book, I could really visualize some of the destruction that was mentioned in the book, and I wanted to add some of that to my piece, so I put them kind of around. So I have references to the Sandy Boulevard overpass with the guardrail, of course the Portland bricks and how they crumbled, and then a little nod to, of course, the start of the book, IKEA. Then the second concept was it was kind of brought about after I read the book. My husband and I did a walk around Mount Tabor, and of course we came across the iconic view looking out to Portland, and it kind of dawned on me that morning that it was kind of a look to the future, and I wanted to represent that because as anybody who's been a survivor in a disaster, they rebuild their communities and they rebuild their lives. And it was just kind of the way I thought of how Annie and her newborn child would move forward by recreating their lives together. So Carrie, in your piece, what is the significance of this stage set and how did you construct it?
Thanks, Leanne. So pretty early in my creative process, I had some inklings of things I might want to pursue for this project, but hadn't really landed on anything yet. And I happened to go to a Portland Rebels performance. This was back during the holidays. And one of the main parts of their stage set was this grand stone hearth. And the aesthetic of the stone hearth was really interesting to me. I found myself just really fascinated by it, especially during the intermission. And I really appreciated how every individual stone had been shaded to provide some 3D detail, but not to the extent that there was, any attempt at some sort of visual illusion. Like, it was certainly obvious to the audience that this was just a flat painted wall as part of a stage set. And I knew one of the things I wanted to incorporate in my work, like Leanne, was the bricks. And so I started thinking, that'd be kind of an interesting way of portraying my pile of brick rubble. And that just sent me down a rabbit hole of thinking about, like, well, what if I made my entire piece kind of a stage set in miniature? And the more I thought about it, the more I really liked how that idea also mirrored some of the main themes in the book, how Annie's relationship with the theater was really ultimately the source of a lot of the anger and regrets that Beth was alluding to earlier. So I decided to just run with that. And from there, it's just one of those amazing processes where everything just fell into place. I often use a lot of found materials in my work anyway, and I'd already thought I wanted to use the frame, and actually the surface is actually a repurposed kitchen cabinet door. And so by virtue of the cabinet's design, there was a nice little recess that allowed me to build up the layers. And I was also able to hide the hole left from the knob by putting in the stage lights. So everything just kind of worked out. Those decisions just allowed everything else to fall into place. So Terry, I know that you did a lot of research for your colored pencil piece. Can you tell us a little bit about your research process and the symbolism of the bears?
Well, thank you for that question. So one of the things I noticed from the book is what I felt is bonds between people, and especially bonds between mother and child. And there were several references to mothers need to be fierce. So, what is one of the fiercest animals you know? Well, mother bear protecting her cub. And so I also wanted to represent it in Portland. So I traveled down to the southeast side and looked for street art. I love street art. And something that represented our city of Portland and the beauty of it. And so I combined the two together, and then we have Mama Bear. So Bonnie, at one time I wove, and I really understand the difficulties of planning a piece. Could you tell us your greatest challenge in designing your piece, which is just amazing?
Thank you. And as you say, as a weaver, you know that there's a lot of planning that goes into before you can even start to the process. My greatest challenge was figuring out how to fit two major themes into one small tapestry. The easiest decision was to represent the physical earthquake with just a few tilted houses. But before I could place those houses in the design, I had to figure out how and where to represent the human side of the story. As Annie frantically crisscrossed Portland, I kept imagining being cut off from my own family. In moments of crisis, the urge to connect with family is overpowering, so it was important to include that in my tapestry. Again, given the small format of my tapestry, I had to work with limitations of size and detail. Eventually, I chose a stylized family icon in silhouette with the mother and infant woven as solid forms, and while the father figure is less distinct as he blends into the background. His fate is unknown. I chose Mount Tabor as the setting for my design. That's where Annie and Dom lived and where she gave birth to being under the shelter of the tall fir trees. Now, many viewpoints on Mount Tabor are framed by those trees as you look toward downtown's Portland and the western skyline in the distance. Like Leanne, my husband and I went and spent a lot of time walking around on Mount Tabor to capture those views. Finally, my title, Then Your Father, is another reference to the importance of family. Throughout the story, Annie talks to her unborn child as she recalls her life with both husband and wife and mother. I imagine Annie will be sharing many stories with me in the future. And Leslie, will you please explain the significance of the bird and feet in your...
Thank you, Bonnie. I will. The feet in my painting are rather large because she was rather large on a very hot day. I was going to say weekend, but it was just this one long hot day with lots of walking in 9 months pregnant. She had Birkenstocks on, and they were not really the right hiking shoe. So she was very uncomfortable, and this I took as her support. She was in pain. The other support item is the bird. The bird is representative of the birds that her mother made to make a little extra cash. These were very much on her mind, her mother. She constantly thought about her mother and what her mother would do, how a mother responds. So that is why I used those two items very large. And as you look at the rest of the painting, your eye will wander from one event to another from this book that you've read. Thank you. And Maria, you have written a beautiful musical piece for us. It is called Little Kidney Bean. Would you be able to play it for us right now? Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. That's beautiful. Beautiful piece. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your process when you're creating something like that?
Yes, absolutely. I was very moved by her conversations, her dialogues with Little Navy Bean, and I felt a lot of love and tenderness when she
would talk to the baby. And I also felt if the baby was not talking in the novel, but was responding to her. It was her pull to earth. It was the force, the life force that helped her get unstuck from her own head. And became, it gave her touch with reality, with the earth, literally with the soil, with the trees, with what's real, and what's important. And the baby gave her the opportunity to life after the disaster.
The life force.
Yes, thank you so much. So Dave. There are so many things going on in your piece, and very curious about, could you talk to us about the bicycles and the trees, please?
Yeah. Happy to, and lovely piece, by the way. The two heavily damaged trees represent the two pillars in the main character's life that she focuses all her attention to. One being the baby that has not been born, and one being her husband. Throughout the story, I kept coming up with the word balance. I felt Annie was trying to find balance with her husband, with her husband's acting career, and now bringing a child into the mix. Once Annie discovered the bike, the imagery started to become clear of a bike on a tightrope, maintaining that balance of whatever she was trying to balance. After several sketches, this became the final draft, with the earth opening up, devouring everything in Portland, and causing Mount Hood to erupt. So now, to my left, we have Nancy Sterling, and Nancy has a lovely piece. Can you talk a little bit about the twisted chords and at the top of your piece and the overall story of your work?
Yes, thank you. The twisted chords represented Annie's state of mind before the earthquake. Her life is very stressful. She's unhappy. She's angry. She's angry at herself. She's angry at Dom. And she gets so wound up when she's at IKEA that when the clerk doesn't pay enough attention to her, she grabs her and rips her sleeve. Well, this has got to be the rock bottom, right? What else can happen? And of course, then the earthquake happens, and whatever stability she was building in her life has collapsed. And so now she is at rock bottom. But she goes on her journey to find Dom, and during that journey, she meets people, and she gets into situations that kind of help her to start being introspective and think about her life choices and her priorities. And by the time she gives birth at the end, she is strong and dedicates herself to being a better person. And so I wanted to take this piece from chaos to clarity. Lisa, what do the crows know?
Generally, I'd say crows are empathic creatures and most likely know what they see and how they feel, much like humans. Crows know how to communicate, create tools for entertainment and survival, and are able to remember the faces of humans that treat them kindly, as well as those who do not. They know about death and experience sadness when they mourn their dead. And I suspect these crows know that their urban habitat has transformed into a landfill in a matter of a few minutes, and things are not what they were yesterday. From their handy new perch on the cement wall, these three crows can see that a frantic human female passing by is about to give birth to a large egg any minute. They don't know this human personality. They don't know this human personally, But they can sense her fear and frustration as she attempts to get past the shattered glass on the bridge to cross the river. And I'd like to point out that they aren't just watching, but discussing her obvious tenacity and courage, because there is no doubt they admire those traits in themselves and each other. They might also be discussing if she will be successful getting to the other side of the river. But here's something I think the crows don't know, and that is that some humans believe that an image of three crows together is symbolic and perhaps might represent major transformation, life changes, and profound personal growth. I suspect a major earthquake might enhance such changes in most humans as well. And maybe the crows are squawking encouragement to Annie to harness her inner strength and wisdom as she embraces the darkness of the night and the unknown. Hi, Mary. Mary, you usually do just focus on a single item in your paintings in many years of doing this, along with me. And we're wondering why you just chose to do so many things in your painting this time. You want it?
I'll tell you. Okay, it's true. I usually pick out one moment from a story and try to illustrate it through the use of watercolor. My process in creating this painting started the same way. I went through several attempts at picking just one image when it occurred to me that this whole story is about a journey. When I travel, I take along a small blank journal that I use to document my trip. Each page represents one day of travel, and I include as many small vignettes as it takes to remind me of what happened each day. When I made the decision to treat my painting as a day in my journal, it all fell into place. When you look at each part of the painting, you see if you can identify each event or place represented throughout Bean's journey into being. And Shobha, your piece is all about layers. How and why did you create the layers?
Thank you. This piece started out by me putting a lot of different things on without thinking a lot about it. So I used a layer of a monoprint, and then I silk screened over it. And then I took silk fabrics that I had dyed with indigo from my garden, fresh indigo, and then lichen from the environment, and dyed them, collaged them on. I went and listened to the author at the Portland Book Fair at Literary Arts in the fall. And one of the things she talked about was she was thinking about how sometimes we in life get stuck. We have all these things and we can only see one future, and until you get a shock point that changes things and you can see a different future. And that really interested me. So I felt like my different layers were patterns and structures from our history, from where we're looking forward to how we feel closed in. And her shock point, of course, was the earthquake. And she got kind of a new beginning at the end. And for me, that new beginning I represented in this painting with snowdrops. Snowdrops are often the first thing to come up in the spring after the dead of winter, and things feel cold and fixed, and things just come alive, and I look forward to seeing them. So my painting is called New Beginnings, and that's why it's the time of that shock, after that shock point, and looking ahead. Susie, your piece is titled Primary Colors. What does that mean?
Well, I used the primary colors as my title because Annie's mom had done these birds, and the three that were left were red, yellow, and blue. I had to try to approach some of the rest of the book with other primary things, and one was the weather, so I represented the heat of the day and the stars of the night. And of course, the primary location was Portland, so you see Mount Hood in the background. Jim, dodging the bricks is your title. What does that mean?
I'm not sure why I got that laugh, but I'm gonna take it. Before the bricks were on the ground, they lay in the walls. Those walls represented security and a shield from the outer world. As the walls gave way, the physical and metaphorical boundaries are lost. One's instinctive response is empathy. Seeking security, we often find solace in our relationships. The embryo represents humanity and our ability to adjust to adversity. The bricks represent the obstacles in our path. And Jan, you have butterflies in your painting. Tell us about the butterflies, please.
Thank you. I, like Beth Yasari, loved the reference to the butterflies, and I loved the way the verses went through the book with beautiful descriptors. And the cabbage butterfly, as Beth found out, is indigenous to our area, and for me represented hope. The cabbage butterfly were flying around Annie's head and indicating that there might be things to come that could be good. The big streaming, steaming destruction is coming up almost like an Art Nouveau dance, while the bricks below are just floating as if in slow motion. So with that said, dream on. So it's now my pleasure to have you give all these artists a round of applause. But wait, we have some more applause, so hang on. So we also need to thank two other entities. The Lakewood Center for the Arts is always supportive of the LO Reads project, and we have TVCTV filming us tonight, so give Christo and Mark a round of applause. But last but not least, I know we have inquiring minds in the audience. Is there anyone in the audience, and I'll get out of the light so I can see you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question to a specific artist? Oh, back in the back.
I have a question for Dave. I was kind of interested in, I think it's called scratchboard, and it just seems obviously very different from your sculpture work, which I'm much more familiar with, and it seems like rather unforgiving. I'm just kind of curious how you made that.
Scratchboard is it's a hardboard. Thank you. Scratchboard is a hardboard with a layer of white chalk and then a layer of black India ink. So it's not too far removed from carving stone, where you literally scratch through the black to reveal the white. And once you've committed, you've got your images going. So, and it's my annual drawing release. It's just a good exercise for me to just display some of my drawing skills.
What do you normally do, Dave?
For those that don't know, I carve stone, and I've got a lot of work around Lake Oswego. I've got a large piece out on Cruise Way as you're coming in, moving over Lake Oswego, and I actually have a piece out front here. There's a liquid soul. It's a basin of olivine on basalt, our two northwest stones. Yeah.
Are there other questions? Oh, man.
I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
I'm wondering how many of the artists felt that the time required to complete their work was what they anticipated, and what percentage thought, man, this is taking a long time.
Yep. Does anyone want to answer that? Okay, we're going to start with Jim and then we're going to Natalie.
You're going to enjoy a lot of failure in the process. So most of the pieces that you see here tonight have gone through several versions, and those versions were stair steps to the final process. For the most part, what you're doing is you're shedding the things that don't work until finally the composition and the idea come together.
For me, I had my images because those were all my photography in the piece. And I knew what I wanted to do, but then I was just waiting for the Portland sun to show back up, which is not a thing that happens between January and now very often. It's sunny today, and I was like, hey, I could have made these today. So you only have a certain amount of time before the UV light isn't really doing its job. So, like I said, when I was pulling so many prints, it was taking a long time because I would do 1 or 2 a day, rinse them, you have to wait overnight while it cures, and then say, okay, we're going back to the drawing board and waiting for the next sunny day.
Any more questions? I have a question for Leanne Strite. Ta-da! I know that you went on a specific path to find your materials. Could you tell us what you had to do to find your materials? As in the brick and the asphalt.
Yeah. So my husband and I used to live in this other house, and we had tons of old Portland bricks. Well, we moved a year ago, and I had none. And I really wanted to use an old Portland brick. So my husband and I were looking around, and one day he happens to go to Home Depot, and they actually sell old bricks at Home Depot. But that wasn't the funny one. The funny one was when I asked him to help me find a little piece of concrete. And he comes home one day and he brings home a piece of concrete. So he spent quite a bit of time pounding it and chiseling it and getting me the right size. So it's always a challenge to find pieces that fit your piece, and that's part of the time to find them, and also finding the right metal and other materials that I use, just like all the artists, just to make sure that it's right, and having them lay out and being able to choose the right colors for tapestry. So it's not an easy thing.
I have one more question, and this is to Susie Cowan. And the back of your piece is really interesting, and you didn't really say a lot about paper marbling. Could you explain that a little?
Years ago in the mid-90s, my studio mate was a bookbinder, Deborah Glantz, and she taught me marbling because a lot of book artists use marbling. I didn't want to become a book artist, I wanted to paint, but I could see the application of the marbling design in painting. So I've been incorporating marbling in my paintings ever since. And if you want to know more about marbling after this event, just talk to me, I'll tell you all about it.
And there you go. The event presentation is now over. I do have to remind you that there are some red dots available. The pieces leave this gallery and then they go traveling throughout the state. So if you have one that calls your name, tonight's the night, and it will actually be here until actually May 1st. Thank you for coming. We'll see you in the gallery.